They do so much to capture carbon from our atmosphere, to clean drinking water for communities, and to provide habitat for threatened and endangered wildlife, and so much more. But one of the biggest threats to these forests is logging. And logging is the threat that we have the most power to scale back, but that is if we really fight to do so. For decades, powerful federal and state agencies have undercut the values that these forests provide to turn out a profit. And in the face of climate change, we really have to do everything that we can to protect what still remains and recover what has been lost. So how do we do that? Well, that depends on so many factors. There is no one-size-fits-all formula for this, but there's definitely some tools in the toolbox that we can point to that have shown varying degrees of success. But where you are in the world, who and what you're up against, your resources, capacity, and your allies are all variables that have to be considered. So today, our panelists are going to walk through some of the tactics that we've used to halt destructive logging proposals that would have otherwise worsened the climate crisis, and we'll leave time at the end to answer your questions. So let's introduce ourselves, and then we can get started. My name is Victoria Wingell, and I am the Forest and Climate Campaigner for Oregon Wild.
I'm Karen Coulter with Blue Mountains Biodiversity Project, which we've been doing for 32 years now.
I'm Jim Oliver with the Center for Responsible Forestry, fighting clear-cut timber sales on state lands in Washington.
I'm Lovechio, the Climate Program Manager with the Klamath-Siskiyou Wildland Center.
Morning, everyone. My name is Madeline Cowen. I'm the Grassroots organizer with Cascadia Wildlands.
Good morning. We volunteer, use volunteers, or don't use volunteers, but volunteers come out with us to field survey thousands of proposed timber sales every summer in eastern Oregon. Thousands of acres, that is. And also in southeast Washington, in up to 5 to 6 national forests. This is Ella, our volunteer coordinator in the Tiger Mill timber sale in the Umatilla National Forest. This is Dylan field surveying in the Morgan Nesbitt sale in the Wallowa-Whitman National Forest, which is between Eagle Cap Wilderness and Hell's Canyon. We gather information on existing conditions, including information from our survey sheets and photographs to inform our comments, our objection negotiations, and potential litigation. The kinds of information that we gather on the survey sheets and in the photographs include wildlife sign and presence, tree species composition, stream conditions, slope steepness, soil types, and impact from past logging. This is Ruby measuring a 50-inch diameter grand fir. We measure trees to show the average tree density size, old growth counts for 1 acre old growth counts, and to show which tree species were there historically, because quite often the Forest Service claims that it's open forest that's very dry when it's actually not historically. And now we are also challenged with the Forest Service switching from a 21-inch diameter limit for logging, which we helped achieve in 1995, and now they've just made it into a voluntary guideline, and they're planning to log large and old trees in every sale that's being proposed, pretty much. This is a three-toed woodpecker, a male from the yellow on the head, and in suitable lodgepole pine old-growth habitat in the Tiger Mill sale. In our field surveys, we document species, identify rare and declining species, and these include species such as rare and sensitive listed woodpeckers, threatened fish species, suitable habitat for marten, lynx, Pacific fisher, and gray wolf. However, the Forest Service systematically eradicates lodgepole pine through clear cutting, so that means that old-growth lodgepole pine habitat is very much diminished, and they're directly responsible in contributing to the three-toed woodpecker's decline. Every summer, our legal team and law students come out to see the timber sales we're planning to litigate. This is the information we gather in the field is geared towards supporting legal claims and helps us to prioritize sales for litigation or negotiation. And Tom Buchel is right there, our senior attorney, and Austin Starnes is in the far left of this picture. I'm not sure if he's here. And we also have law students come out. This is Alex, who's volunteered with us for at least 12 years in the North Fork Crooked River sale on the Lovechio National Forest. The main Forest Service rationale for logging is fire risk reduction, yet even in dry ponderosa pine forests like this, all that's really needed is small tree thinning up to about 9 inches because they've taken out most of the mature and large trees already, which are more fire resistant. And so now they are claiming that they have to go back in and log because of fire risk, but they created, to a large extent, the fire risk, and also prescribed burning. But these kind of manipulations should be best done immediately around residential communities, not in the backcountry. Mature and large trees are more fire resistant due to thicker bark and to higher crowns. Yet most of the mature forest cover and most of the large trees are gone from past logging. So basically, the Forest Service is designing its rationale based on its past mismanagement, for logging, that is. This is Peter measuring old-growth Engelmann spruce with a lightning scar. It's a live spruce. The lightning strike did not kill it. In moist mixed conifer high elevation forests like this one, in the Tiger Mill sale, trees can be struck by lightning and survive without any resulting large fires due to long-lasting snowpack and higher precipitation levels. Thus, fires at high elevations usually have much longer intervals between fires, such as up to 100 to 250 years due to higher moisture retention. This is the Tiger Mill sale area, which targets never logged forests in the protected Walla Walla Municipal Watershed, which has never been logged, and also targets an inventoried roadless area that's never been logged, and then substantial never logged forest and old growth in between. And the guise for this timber sale is that it's fire risk reduction, but as you can see in the picture here, there's a lot of natural fuel breaks all the way between the timber sale area and the city of Walla Walla and the nearest community is big fuel breaks that have naturally occurred. And then also within the sale units themselves, there's moist and wet alder growth, which are great fuel breaks all throughout the sale units. This is a very high moisture retentive forest at about 6,000 feet. Oops, back. Wait. Oh well, I'll show the bear now. So anyway, this is a black bear that we saw in the Tiger Mill sale, and a volunteer photographed and videoed this black bear moving through the forest. Species like black bears need security habitat from hunters and predators. And also need a variety of large structures, such as logs and snags, in which to forage. This is a white-tailed fawn in the Tiger Mill sale. Unfortunately, the Forest Service systematically targets density, whatever it is, on the map or on the aerial or LiDAR, satellite footage. They just make circles around density and plan to log them no matter what's in there. Yet there's a number of species that need denser forests for hiding cover from predators and for thermal cover from severe storms and extreme heat waves, which will increase under climate change. So these species that need denser forests include deer, elk, northern goshawk, pileated woodpecker, marten, Pacific fisher, and other species like that. And this is me, obviously, on an old growth Douglas fir stump in the Mount Emily sale. We also document signs of past logging to show what kind of tree species composition historically existed and the size of the trees removed, as well as soil impact from past logging. We helped establish the 21-inch limit on logging in 1995. So we're also looking to see how many large trees have already been removed now that they're planning to log that again. Many wildlife species need large tree structure. This is a Williamson sapsucker on an old-growth Engelmann spruce in the Tiger Mill sale. Some of the species that require large tree structure, including snags and logs, including Williamson sapsucker, pileated woodpecker, white-headed woodpecker, Lewis's woodpecker, northern goshawk, great gray owl, American martin, and Pacific fisher. The last two require large cavities in old-growth fir for denning. Oops. This is Lexi with an old-growth grand fir snag in the Morgan nested sale. We document large and old-growth tree structure since this is important to retain for wildlife habitat and also is critically needed for long-term carbon sequestration and carbon storage. And live trees can sequester carbon for hundreds of years, with carbon storage perpetuated for up to many decades as old-growth snags and logs. A recent Forest Service trend is for the Forest Service to now log again in designated riparian habitat conservation areas that were specifically designated to protect creeks, rivers, lakes, and springs from logging and road impacts to water quality, and to provide suitable habitat for fish species and amphibians such as Columbia spotted frogs and salamanders and macroinvertebrates that are necessary for fish food. And some of the threatened fish species in our area include Chinook salmon, bull trout, mid-Columbia trout, steelhead trout. And this is another riparian habitat conservation area that is filled with hardwoods, and as you can see, there's plenty of sunshine. There's alders, Rocky Mountain maple, red osier dogwood along this creek, which you can see some of that. And then downstream, there's actually cottonwoods. And yet, even though the rationale for logging this is to improve riparian hardwood habitat and open up the forest for more sunlight so that these riparian hardwoods could thrive, but yet it's already like that in this, along Trinity Creek, in the Clark Sale, and the Wallowa-Whitman, a proposed timber sale. And this is Parker measuring an old-growth grand fir on a steep slope in the Tiger Mill sale. This is typical of the slopes there that they're planning to log. We're very concerned about proposed logging on steep slopes because most of them are over creeks, and ash soil creates fine sediment that can be displaced easily and go into the creeks and choke out the fish. The Tiger Mill sales also plan to log steep slopes above and within the municipal watershed, which would impair water quality and which would also impair conditions for downstream fish. And this is the Mount Emily sale. Another Forest Service trend is to use categorical exclusions to ram through timber sales that otherwise might meet a lot of opposition. They basically truncate public process, and it makes the timber sales very hard to stop. We have very little time or very little possibility for legal claims the way Congress writes these up. Yet the Mount Emily sale includes the last area of old growth in between clear cuts next to a roadless area and within a designated recreation area, and we would not have known that this is the last old growth surrounded by clear cuts that is about to be cut again if we hadn't field surveyed it. Even though there aren't large trees planned for logging in this particular sale because it's a categorical exclusion, but it doesn't really matter because this is the Mount Emily elk herd, which is huge. I followed this elk herd through the forest. There's around 100 or so of them. They would be displaced because they need denser habitat. So all along the riparian corridors that they're planning to log in this sale as well, that's where the elk were. And in all the adjacent sale units to those corridors and in all the dense forests. And this is an area where elk are very much prized. Oops, whoops, whoops. Hang on. So I'll just conclude that we need volunteers in this field season. These are volunteers who came out in the Morgan Nesbitt sale. By the way, they're wearing our t-shirts. And we go out every summer. We're inviting you to come help us. You need to bring hiking and camping gear and food to contribute for shared meals, and you need to have your own public transportation, your own transportation or carpooling. And please talk to me if you'd like to volunteer. We ask that volunteers come out for at least 1 week, and we'd love to see you in the forest and to join our forest community. Thank you.
Hello. My name is Jim, and for the past year I've been working for the Center for Responsible Forestry in the Salish Sea area of so-called Washington. We're a grassroots forest advocacy group dedicating to protecting mature forests across that bioregion. I was brought into CRF a year ago to coordinate our volunteer surveying program, an effort that was mostly inspired by Karen's work in the Blue Mountains. So we designed our surveying program after Blue Mountains. Over the past year, we've had a lot of success fighting timber sales across the region, and I will share a few examples today. But first, some background on the issue. The state of Washington has treated its publicly owned forests as a cash cow for decades, allowing huge conglomerates like Interfor and Sierra Pacific to clear-cut publicly owned timber for private profit, and justifying that by invoking the small percentage of revenue that goes to schools. All state-controlled land in Washington is managed by the Department of Natural Resources, DNR. They use the euphemism variable retention harvest for their logging because clear-cutting is now a dirty word. It's a situation that is similar in some ways to what Karen just described, major differences being that our region is much wetter and much more populated. Serious community organizing against mature forest logging in Western Washington escalated in the fall of 2020 when some residents of Olympia drew a line in the sand by blockading the road to the Chameleon timber sale, drawing attention to the issue overall and serving as a flashpoint of resistance. Around that time, CRF was founded in Thurston County as a volunteer forest monitoring group. The smuggler timber sale was the first sale that CRF got partially canceled by finding old growth in it, leading to a Seattle Times article that embarrassed the Public Lands Commissioner, Hillary Franz, and resulted in her going on the record implementing a temporary moratorium of all pre-1900 forests to give DNR time to develop an older forest policy. This policy was never developed, and the moratorium got lifted 1 year later. Since then, CRF has expanded its scope, and we are currently monitoring dozens of timber sales across the region. Here's a map view of all the timber sales that DNR has planned over the next 4 years. So all the red, yellow, and orange dots on the map are proposed timber sales, most of which are clear cuts. Our larger goal is to enact a statewide mature forest policy which would prohibit the clear cutting of mature forests, only about 71,000 acres of which remain unprotected on state-controlled lands. This is a multi-year effort which has spawned an entire movement. Hundreds of people rallied last summer to demand the state stop clear-cutting mature forests. Until the mature forest policy is enacted, we have to fight these timber sales one by one. And luckily, we've had a lot of success with that in various ways over the past year. I'll talk about a few of the forests we've saved so far and the stories of how we achieved these victories. In March of 2023, we surveyed the Wishbone timber sale, located in Snoqualmie Traditional Territory an hour east of Seattle. This is a classic second-growth forest, emblematic of what we're trying to protect. It's a mostly flat, wet area close to a creek, and a fresh 200-acre clear-cut right down the road served as a stark reminder of what lay in store for this forest if DNR's plans were allowed to proceed. We shared our survey data with anyone who asked, including several more well-established conservation groups, and a lawsuit was filed against the sale. The sale was also brought to the attention of local elected officials, including those with ambitions for higher office who are seeking to curry favor with the environmental community. These officials were able to lean on the DNR to cancel the sale after it had already been approved by the board, which had never happened before. The Wishbone sale was canceled on July 25th, 2023, the day before it was scheduled to be auctioned. In June 2023, we surveyed the Anderson Adjusted Timber Sale near the town of Quilcene on the Olympic Peninsula. and we discovered one of the only known occurrences of a G1S1 rare plant community: western red cedar, grand fir, western sword fern. These are common, well-known plants, but they only rarely exist in this particular configuration. G1S1 means it's extremely rare at both the global and state levels. We had recently started using DNR's dichotomous key to rare plant communities as part of our surveying. We shared our findings with the DNR, and they canceled the sale completely, acting like it had never existed at all. Another victory came several months later in the Green Mountain area of Kitsap County. Along with our fellow conservationists, we found several other occurrences of a different rare plant community: Douglas fir, western hemlock, Pacific rhododendron, California huckleberry. This is a G2S2, so not quite as rare as the previous one, but still rare enough that DNR was legally required to conserve it. We shared our survey data with the DNR. They sent out their own biologists to verify our findings, and they ended up finding a second rare plant community in addition to the one we found. Through one afternoon of plot-based surveying, we were able to conserve 257 acres of Green Mountain that was scheduled to be clear-cut over the following decade. Many of you are no doubt familiar with the Elwha River, site of the largest dam removal in North America to date. The dam removal was completed almost 10 years ago. The salmon have returned to the river, and the entire valley is healing. But the struggle for the Elwha is not over. DNR owns plenty of land in the lower valley, and they are trying to clear-cut it quickly, similar to the rest of Washington, before our movement is successful and the mature forest policy is eventually enacted. These proposed clear-cuts in the Elwha Valley spawned a local resistance movement that drew statewide attention to some of the more urgent and egregious timber sales in the area. One of these timber sales, called TCB 23, was quietly sold without board approval in summer of 2023 as part of a DNR pilot program to clear-cut mature hardwoods across the state and replace them with Douglas fir plantations. We did a survey for the same rare plant community that we had previously found, western red cedar, grand fir, western sword fern, and we found it here as well. It took a lot of nagging and public pressure for the DNR to send someone out to verify our findings, but they eventually did so, and the sale was canceled in December after it had already been sold. Finally, our most recent victory. The Carrot timber sale is a 100-year-old second-growth forest in the Black Hills near Olympia. We surveyed it in March 2023 and alerted the community that it's a priority for conservation. The county commissioners agreed, and they unanimously asked the DNR to cancel the Carrot sale, as well as all other mature forest timber sales in Thurston County. The Board of Natural Resources did not listen. On January 3rd, 2024, at a public meeting, they approved this timber sale, among others. This was the most contentious public meeting in the Board of Natural Resources history. The sale was approved, but a lawsuit was pending against it by conservation groups and the county commissioners. Then, just a few weeks ago, a handful of elders from the surrounding communities engaged in a public direct action, taking down all the flags marking the boundaries of the timber sale and delivering them to the DNR office. The next day, the DNR's website showed that Carrot and another mature forest timber sale nearby had both been withdrawn. This not only saved close to 300 acres of mature forest, but more importantly, it drew a line in the sand that no more clear cutting would be allowed in Thurston County. This is a great example of how several different tactics can be wisely used together to defend the forests we care about. In this case, a combination of surveying, community organizing, lawsuits, and direct action got the job done. Wrapping up, here's how to get involved. I know most of you probably do not live in so-called Washington, but if you do, you are invited to come out and survey threatened timber sales with CRF and or to join our community organizing efforts to enact a statewide mature forest policy. Just Google us or find us on socials for more info. If you're in Oregon, you can volunteer with an awesome group like the Blue Mountains Biodiversity Project, BARK, Cascadia Wildlands, Oregon Wild, Umpqua Watersheds, etc. And if you live anywhere else, hopefully there are similar groups in your area doing awesome work.
Good morning, everyone. How's it going? My name is Madeline Cowen. I'm the Grassroots organizer with Cascadia Wildlands, and I'm really excited to be up here with my excellent co-panelists, talk to you all a little bit about our work to to defend and restore Cascadia's wild ecosystems in the forests, in the courts, and the streets. So I like maps, so I'm going to show you a couple maps. This is the Cascadia bioregion. I did not make these maps, but on the left, it just kind of shows you where this bioregion is in relation to the political boundaries of so-called Washington, Oregon, Idaho, and Canada. But I'm really excited about the Cascadia bioregion because it is centered around the concept that these political boundaries are not appreciated or acknowledged by the animals and the rivers and the people who've been living here since time immemorial. So a little bit about my work. It's very similar to what Karen and Jim have described, except I am not working in Washington or in Eastern Oregon. The field surveying work that I do with Cascadia wildlands is shown in these kind of horrible block squares that are, but I also, and this map is obviously very simplified. But generally the lands that I'm doing the field checking work are in, is predominantly Douglas fir and mixed conifer and spruce hemlock forests. Of course, like I mentioned, the lands here are very complicated, and these are the general territories of the indigenous peoples who have lived here since time immemorial and have cared for and stewarded the lands here, including the forests and everything else that is in this area as well. So also, the forests that I'm working in are primarily in this rain shadow of the Cascades, similar to where Jim works. So I like this map because it shows us these different regions and kind of how the weather systems impact the forests that I'm working on. So we have the Coast Range, and then we're here in the Valley, number 2, and then really wet forests right against the Cascades before all those clouds are blocked, and then it gets a little bit drier on Eastern Oregon, but as Karen mentioned, there are also high elevation moist mixed conifer forests in Eastern Oregon. These lands are complex, diverse, and they have varying management styles and directions. And so the blue we have here is all the federal forests, and then the green is non-federal forests, and then the yellow areas are areas that are either national parks or wilderness areas, so where the least amount of public lands logging occurs. So diving back into a little bit of what the timber sale monitoring work that I do, and I'm going to be talking specifically about Bureau of Land Management lands. And so these, again, I didn't make this map. Shout out to Coast Range Association for making this map. But just to give you a picture of what this landscape looks like, of course, this is just a map, and that's why it's important for us to go into the field. But the purple checkerboard here that you see is primarily Bureau of Land Management lands, and it's literally a checkerboard. Each of these squares are typically a square mile, and you have the Bureau of Land Management lands in the yellow, and then it alternates between private lands as well. So the way that the landscapes are parsed out in this way makes it very, very complicated when we're doing our field checking work on BLM lands, because there's oftentimes access issues, and it's really hard for wildlife and ecosystems to have any chance of connectivity with so much clear cutting on private lands. And so this is the same checkerboard shot, but you can really tell where the private lands clear cuttings happened, and then the kind of more green luscious areas are the Bureau of Land Management lands, so like the remaining public intact forest. And there's virtually no restrictions on logging on private lands, and so that's why we get these massive entire clear-cut squares right next to our public lands. And this is what it looks like on the ground. So on the left is a photo of the private logging practice following the Archie Creek fire after the 2020 Labor Day fires. And you can see the private industry just slicks off the entire mountain. And this is really rampant throughout the years following the 2020 Labor Day fires. On the right, we have a volunteer, Chris, with an old growth Douglas fir tree in the 42 Divide timber sale outside of Roseburg. And I don't know if you can tell, but there's lots of fire scars present on this tree. And so this tree has been through many fires, and the forest, if they had not been clear cut by the private industries, likely would have been able to withstand or be more adapted to the fires that have happened and that we're experiencing now. So how are the Bureau of Land Management lands managed? This is a little bit nerdy, and it's not, but it is important to understand because it's completely different than U.S. Forest Service and DNR lands like Gambit was talking, or Jim was talking about. And so, the Bureau of Land Management lands are not managed the same way that the Forest Service lands are, which is in the Forest Service lands are managed under the Northwest Forest Plan. Who's heard of the Northwest Forest Plan? Lots of folks. And there's been some wonderful panels this weekend about the plan and the amendment process. But in 2016, a plan was finalized to basically remove the BLM lands from the Northwest Forest Plan and instead be managed under this new resource management plan. And this plan was really tragic for BLM lands because it increased the logging levels by so much, by 37%, and it opened up a lot of lands that were protected under Northwest Forest Plan protections to basically be logged at lesser rates. It opened them up into more aggressive logging styles. And notably, it removed the survey and manage program that is really valuable and useful on U.S. Forest Service lands. Okay, let's talk about some timber sales on BLM land. These are just the, and by the numbers. My friend Alexi is going to dive into a specific timber sale and tell you about that. But these are the sales that are active that we're tracking right now, and there's lots of numbers up there of the acres, and they're just to demonstrate how massive the amount of logging that is currently proposed on BLM lands, just in the Coast Range, just in Western Oregon Coast Range, just in those blocky square areas that I showed you at the beginning. So there's about 788,000 acres of currently proposed logging, which is about 1,200 square miles. So Portland is 140 square miles. So that's a lot of Portlands. And that is, and it's, yeah, so, and a lot of the logging has not occurred yet. So we're doing everything that we can to mitigate the worst impacts of these projects and remove all of the old growth and mature forests from the projects. So we do field checking. So we go out into the forest, and time again, we find really, really beautiful old growth mature forests, really quality habitat for species who are just trying to survive within that checkerboard. This is the Baker's Dozen timber sale. This is the North 126 timber sales right outside of Eugene. This was a stand that the BLM is saying has no open space, is overpacked, densely packed forest that needs to be thinned in their style, which is aggressive logging, leaving a few amount of trees. And so what we found in our field checking efforts is the opposite of what they're saying on the paper. So this is an example of very nice, open, lush area, lots of native plants and older trees, and a lot of chanterelles. This is the 42 Divide timber sale. This one is just massive and has lots of really nice, beautiful, mature, and old growth forests. this is not, I couldn't find my better photo of this, so I apologize, but this photo on the right is really remarkable because it's an old-growth sugar pine, a Douglas fir, and a ponderosa pine, all just like hanging out and being buddies right next to each other. And it's just a testament to how biodiverse this area is. There's many different types of species. It's right at the southernmost part of the Coast Range and the northernmost part of the Klamath-Siskiyou, so it has all kinds of really unique biodiverse areas in it. So, and hedgehog mushrooms. This is another shot of 42 Divide. Again, the agency, or just like big, tall, standing trees, multiple layers in the canopy, and no need for thinning in these stands. It's the blue and gold timber sale. Again, big old growth trees. This is us field checking that timber sale. And so what are the justifications for these BLM timber sales? Among many things, I mentioned that they will often say that they need to be thinned, and they'll say that they need to thin them for fuels reduction to help with mitigating wildfire. And this is a stand in the 42 Divide timber sale again that the agency wants to thin for fuels reduction. But oftentimes this is what it looks like after fuels reduction projects. They may go in there and thin and open up lots of space and get lots of logs out of there, but they'll leave these giant slash piles that they are supposed to go back and burn, but they oftentimes are left there. So it doesn't take a rocket scientist or a wildfire scientist to understand which one of these areas is higher risk for rapidly spreading fire that can come into our communities. This is, again, the 42 Divide timber sale. These are just screenshots directly from the scoping notice. They want to manage this stand for northern spotted owl. There are known spotted owls that live in this stand, and it's doing just fine. The spotted owls are living there, and there's lots of nice spacing. They love spacing between trees. There's actually already nice spacing there. So this is one that we've documented and sent all of our information and field work data into the BLM. Some of the BLM units look like this. This is another unit in the 42 Divide timber sale where there's a lot of even-aged, younger Douglas fir trees that are maybe struggling to find light. They have lots of branches that are at the bottom base of the trees. And so this is a stand where we say, okay, BLM, you can go in there and selectively remove a few trees to help this stand be healthier. So we're not saying no logging, but we are saying don't log the old growth and mature forest, and when you do log, approach it from a stewarding angle. Okay, so we use all of our field checking information and data, and we bring people out into the woods, and we also sometimes get to the point where we need to sue the agencies. And these are some lawyer people being cute in lawyer outfits. So we have had a couple of wins with BLM timber sales. I'm not going to go into it because I know that we're running short on time. So Thurston Hills was one. We had some really strong legal claims that ultimately got the BLM to drop the sale, but it wasn't possible without all of the field checking work that we did to help inform those those lawsuits. And then also we did a lot of engaging with the local community, knocking on all the doors of the residents who live adjacent to the timber sale. We built a coalition with local interest groups like mountain biking groups and plant society groups, so building coalition with others, and then we also did an LTE media storm with this project. We had at least 10 LTEs sent into the Eugene Weekly every month, just like talking about this, and so it just became an issue in the media, and that was really helpful. We just won this one, Big League. We had some really solid legal claims on this. The agency basically failed to consider spotted owl habitat, carbon storage, stream flows, and water quality. So they just really did not do due diligence at all on that sale. But again, we also did similar grassroots efforts. And that is a segue to Alexi, who's going to talk about another BLM timber sale.
Okay, hi everyone. My name is Lovechio. I'm the Climate Program Manager with the Clamath Wildland Center, also known as KS Wild. We are a nonprofit based a couple hours south of here in Ashland, Oregon, and we focus on protecting the public lands in Southern Oregon and Northern California. And today I was asked to talk about the tactics we have used to try to stop the poor windy timber sale, which is being proposed by the Medford District BLM. First, I just want to give a quick background about the Klamath region and KS Wild. We've been monitoring and fighting old growth timber sales since the late 90s. Our region is about 11 million acres, and it stretches north to the Umpqua River Valley and then all the way south to California wine country. Of that 11 million acres, 8 million is public land, so we're monitoring 5 national forests and 2 BLM districts. The region is dominated by the Rogue River watershed and the Klamath River watershed. The region, and just to get an idea of the types of forests that we're advocating for, this region is one of the most biodiverse regions in the world. There's over 36 different species of conifers, including the Port Orford cedar and the brewer spruce, which is in that photo, and those two are endemic to the region. And we also have about over 200 unique and rare plants that are only found in the Klamath. So this region is really unique and biodiverse, and unfortunately is always under threat from logging projects. So the poor windy timber sale. This sale was proposed in 2019 by the Medford District BLM, and it covers about 15,000 acres. 4,500 of those acres are mature old growth forests, and those are the forests that KS Wild is mostly concerned about because those are where the spotted owl is using that as nesting and foraging habitat, and it's critical for their survival. So you can see in this map all of the yellow is BLM lands, and in that blue boundary line, that is the Poor Windy Project area. And this is also extremely checkerboard, like Madeline was talking about. So we have BLM lands, checkerboard next to these private industrial clear cuts. So the forests in the Poor Windy sale are the last remaining intact forests that we have in this region. They're totally necessary for spotted owl habitat, and they are providing the last remaining connectivity corridor in this extremely fragmented landscape. So they're super important, and Poor Windy is right smack in the middle of that. And so the BLM's stated purpose for this Poor Windy sale is that they want to contribute timber volume to their allowable sale quantity. So they want to get the logs out. They want to reduce fire risk and the risk of crown fires. And they want to promote the development and retention of large open grown trees, which is pretty ironic because they are targeting 4,500 acres of large and open grown trees. So some of the tactics we have used to stop this sale. We first litigated the Poor Windy sale back in October of 2022 with our partners Oregon Wild and Cascadia Wild. We filed a suit against the U.S. Fish and Wildlife's biological opinion, claiming that the BLM and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife had illegally authorized harm to spotted owls in the old growth habitat upon which they rely on for their survival. The district court judge ruled in our favor, which temporarily stopped the sale, which was a pretty huge success. But then, unfortunately, a year later, the BLM completed a new draft biological assessment that forms the basis for yet another biological opinion by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So these documents put the Poor Windy sale back on the chopping block. And recently, the BLM has auctioned off the remaining timber sales and has picked up logging again. And so we were previously field checking before our litigation, but then after these forests were back on the chopping block, we decided we have to go back out into this forest and see, well, what else can we do to get these forests off the table? And so, just a side note, once you successfully litigate a sale, legally you can't go back and relitigate on the same merits. I'm not a lawyer, but this is called preclusion. Our conservation director explained that to me beforehand. So we can't litigate anymore, so now we're going back into the field to say, what can we do to stop this sale? And so what we did was we went to units that were previously marked. So the Forest Service had marked the trees that they wanted to log. They marked where all the temporary roads were going to be placed for logging, and we started to walk those temporary roads. And what we saw was that the BLM was including the biggest trees in the project area in these logging road corridors. And as you can see in these photos, these trees are huge. All of them are going to be cut down just to put in a temporary road to get logs out of the woods. And so coupled with our field checking, we were also looking through all the NEPA documents that are associated with this sale. And we started to realize that the Medford District BLM gets millions of board feet from add-on timber volume. And so what that means is that the BLM is getting millions of board feet from logs that are in proposed yarding corridors, log landings, and new road construction. And this volume, in these areas, there's no DBH limit on the size of the trees that they can cut. So it's kind of a free-for-all. And of course, we noticed the BLM is placing the largest trees in the units in those 3 categories. So we're discovering these like old growth logging loopholes that the Medford BLM is implementing. And so lastly, we were also starting to attend the timber sale auctions at the local BLM district. And what we noticed is going on there is that the Medford District BLM timber sales are selling between 2 to 3 times the BLM's appraised price, suggesting that the BLM is undervaluing old growth forests and overemphasizing the removal of these old growth forests in order to increase financial profits for timber purchasers. Yet again, another old growth logging loophole that the BLM is using. So with all this new information, our next tactic was to make as much noise as possible about this sale. And we were really trying to expose the BLM and their use of these old growth logging loopholes in the poor windy timber sale. And so we started communicating about this sale a little differently and started trying to dismantle the BLM's narrative that they're not cutting down mature and old growth trees and actually show what they're doing with these photos that we have from ground truthing. So over the course of 2 years, we've taken community members out to the sale. We've sent letters to the editor to get the local media involved. We've sent in over 1,000 action alerts to the Medford District BLM and the Secretary of Department of Interior. We've sent in over 500 postcards to the Biden administration asking to stop mature and old growth logging of public lands and use the poor windy sale as an example. We've even gone to Washington, D.C., brought this issue to our congressional delegation, highlighting the poor windy timber sale as a threat to mature and old growth and sort of letting Congress know about these old growth logging loopholes. And we were doing these things because the local Medford District BLM wasn't listening to our concerns and had no sign of showing that they wanted to cancel the sale. Our strategy was to raise the profile, to get the local media involved, get the congressional delegation involved, and to build enough pressure that hopefully the BLM would cancel the sale. That hasn't happened yet. So our last tactic that we're trying to implement with this sale is to involve BLM leadership. So we've done all we can do on the legal side. We can't litigate the sale anymore. So the next step is like, who else can cancel the sale? BLM leadership has the power to do that. So while we were in D.C., we spoke to the deputy director of the BLM, Nada Coulter, because we wanted to show her, there's a big disconnect from what's happening in Washington, D.C. to how they're actually managing our lands on the ground. And we wanted to show her the pictures of the trees that are being targeted for logging. And we really wanted to build that connection. We weren't expecting her to cancel the sale right away, but now we have this dialogue going on with BLM leadership to really highlight what is happening on the ground with the Medford District BLM. And we also incorporate into our conversations is that President Biden issued an executive order back in 2022 that requires the BLM and the Forest Service to protect the remaining mature and old growth. So we were showing how the poor windy timber sale is the exact opposition of what President Biden is offering. But Victoria's going to talk more about that in a bit. So I wish I had a happier ending for poor windy, but we're still in the fight. I think fighting timber sales can take a really long time. can take 2 years, 5 years. We did successfully remove a couple hundred acres of mature and old growth trees from that sale with our initial litigation, but the poor windy sale, the story is still unwritten, and we are really hoping that BLM leadership or this executive order will take the sale off the table. So we are still in the middle of the fight, and hopefully we have a victory. But Victoria's up next.
Hi again, everyone. My name is Victoria Wingell. I'm the Forest and Climate Campaigner with Oregon Wild. Okay, so I'm going to talk to you today about the Flat Country Timber Sale. So this sale was first proposed in 2019, and the fight to save Flat Country was a 5-year battle that brought together activists, lawyers, scientists, and so much more from across the state. It's located in the Willamette National Forest, not far from Eugene. Prior to colonization, the Mackenzie Bridge area was a favorite camping spot for Native people who traveled from the Warm Springs Reservation to the upper Mackenzie River to fish, hunt deer, and pick huckleberries. The lower Mackenzie River was a good location for fishing for salmon and picking hops, but today these lands are managed by the U.S. Forest Service and guided by federal forest policy. So this logging project was a 2,000-acre proposal that included 1,000 acres of aggressive clear-cut style logging in stands at least 98 to 170 years old. We have documented evidence that there was trees even older than this within the forest, within the logging sale. And through field checking efforts, volunteers found that there was no shortage of reasons for why this forest was worth more standing. There was plenty of diversity, carbon-storing giants, moss-covered Douglas firs, and western hemlocks. It was perfect habitat for endangered wildlife that rely on the very specific characteristics of an old-growth forest, and so much more. So this forest really was as magic as it is important. So a little bit of context on our policy hook, the executive order that Alexi just referenced. This came out in 2022. The Biden administration took a huge step forward by announcing an executive order that has the potential to ultimately protect federal forest lands like Flat Country from logging. So this order called for 3 things: to define and inventory mature and old-growth forests on federal lands, to identify the threats that they're facing, and to develop policies to protect them. So this was huge for mature forests. Finally, they were getting the recognition that they deserved as being important for the climate, and so this executive order really became the vehicle that we used to move the campaign to save Flat Country forward, and what we're also using to call for a national rulemaking that would take logging projects like it off the table forever. So the pressure cooker. There was definitely an inside strategy versus an outside, very public pressure campaign, and most of this presentation is going to be about the public pressure, but there's a few additional points that I want to highlight because these pieces worked really well in tandem with each other. So there was definitely grass tops organizing happening. There were influential people who were very publicly outspoken against this project, namely Congressman Peter DeFazio. It's also important to note that our target for this campaign was the White House. Anything that we did, we wanted to make sure that they knew about it. This could create some added pressure on the Forest Service to reverse course. There was also a looming threat of litigation. There was also a significant new information letter that a few environmental NGOs in the area submitted together. This was asking the agency to perform a supplemental environmental review of the new information that arose since 2020. So this was in reference to the Holiday Farm fires and the executive order that was a directive to protect mature and old-growth forests, which is exactly the type of trees that were being targeted in this sale. And then I'll dive into the Grassroots pieces shortly. So this is a cover of our Worth More Standing report. This was a report that was compiled by the Climate Forest Campaign, which is made up of more than 120 different groups from across the country. This report amplified Flat Country as one of the top 10 most egregious examples of mature and old-growth logging that's happening in federal lands in the U.S. So in total, this report covered over 240,000 acres of old forests that are actively threatened by logging on federal public lands. The Forest Service had been trying to say that logging was no longer a threat to these forests, so we really set out to set the record straight on that. And this really made waves in the media, which was super exciting. We saw coverage in The Hill, and Bloomberg Government, Counterpunch, several other large outlets, and it was syndicated more than 70 times in local papers. So this led to even more coverage specifically for the flat country, some of which included the Washington Post, Grist. We also saw LTEs and op-eds, and this really put the intersection of forest and climate issues and the threat of logging out there into the national conversation. So then a lot of organizing went into building public pressure. As you've heard, field checking is one tactic that has been used in every example we've heard today. So you've probably gathered by now that this is really important, not only to fact check and discover what is actually happening on the ground, but also to have people really fall in love with the forest and cultivate that drive to protect it. So huge shout out to Cascadia Wildlands and the Wildcat volunteers that spent countless hours out in the forest. There was also a series of public hikes through the sale just so people could really see it for themselves. It really makes a huge difference to just get out there and really feel what is at stake. We did a lot of tabling and engaging with the local community. So this logging sale was proposed on the headwaters of the Mackenzie River, and this is where Eugene's residents get their drinking water from. So it was really important to get this information out to the public because the Forest Service has routinely tried to stifle public engagement with these processes. So we got really creative with how we did that. We even made a different version of Jenga where if you pulled different pieces, you could learn about different logging sales that were threatening some of our most important forests. We mailed thousands of postcards to both the U.S. Forest Service and the White House, and of course we circulated a number of petitions that received hundreds of signatures. There was even a banner hang across Highway 126 to call attention to this sale. And I really love this tactic. It's edgy, it has some teeth, and it evokes a certain emotion. By this point, we were seeing the flat country proposal inch closer and closer to auction. And so this tactic was a way to really rise to the moment, make a statement, and get the message out there again in the media. Then there was the Deep Roots Action Camp. There was a fabulous panel on this yesterday. I hope you got to check that out. But I want to chat a bit about the first year of the camp because this was located within the Flat Country Sale. So this was a life-changing weekend out in the woods. There was about 75 to 90 humans who gathered for a camp out within a proposed unit within the sale. And these were highly motivated activists who were really willing to go the distance to protect the forest. And gathering here was a way to really coalesce all of this energy and funnel it into something that was timely and that really needed this kind of energy. And there were so many beautiful connections made at this gathering. We learned a lot from each other, and we created lots of art to make for a really vibrant display at future rallies that had been planned, and all of this was so important for movement building. My favorite piece was truly the relationship building aspect. As we all know, organizing to fight climate change can be really heavy work, but doing that alongside your friends who you care really deeply about really makes for a much better time, and it helps to sustain the movement as well. As folks have mentioned, sometimes this can take years, so you want to make sure that you're in it together for the long haul. So then shortly after, we grabbed our boats and we got out on the Mackenzie River. This was a super fun day. We had hundreds of forest defenders out on the water just enjoying the beautiful day. We did make it out in the paper, so it was another opportunity to bring water quality issues back into the conversation. As I mentioned, this was threatening the Mackenzie River, so that's exactly where we went. It had a really unique pull to it, and we got a lot of images and content that we could reuse to keep the drum beating over the next few months. And it was also a way to keep the activists engaged and having fun, again, feeding into the willingness to really stick it out for the long haul. So while this was happening, shortly after, if you recall the Worth More Standing report I referenced earlier, right ahead of COP27, organizers who had been fighting timber sales that were listed in that report organized together so we could hold a national week of action and draw attention to the nasty logging proposals that were listed in the report. So in 6 different states, groups gathered outside of U.S. Forest Service offices so that we could deliver petitions to the agencies and call on them to cancel the sale in question and develop a national rule that would protect forests like them from logging. So here we went to the Forest Service office in Portland. A volunteer sourced a 150-year-old cut that had already been cut and displayed that outside of the Forest Service office in order to signify the types of trees that were at risk in flat country. And then in December, the Forest Service made the very unusual decision to withdraw the sale. It was really awesome. So before this, the Forest Service had given the option to settle before going to court. They had promised to drop some of the units from the sale, but this unfortunately left way too much at stake, and I'm really glad that everyone decided to stick it out to the end because it was certainly worthwhile. So what's next? Well, we keep fighting. This is obviously a huge success that's worth celebrating, but the future of flat country and forests like it are uncertain. There's no permanent protections in place, but this summer the Forest Service will be accepting public comments on a new national old growth amendment, and we hope that this will mean the end of commercial logging for old growth on federal lands. But we also hope that this will be the floor and not the ceiling when it comes to protecting our forests. So if you go to this link, you'll be able to fill out a petition, and then you'll automatically be added to our list, and we'll let you know when the time has come. We're expecting a really huge public comment engagement opportunity this summer, and we would love to have all your support there. And then a couple of key takeaways from this campaign on why it was a success. So endless pressure, endlessly applied. It came from all angles, both within the system and outside of it. It could be hung on very specific policy hooks. So the executive order that I had mentioned was really huge in driving this forward, and it could also be huge for protecting forests like it. The intensity of the tactics matched the intensity of the moment. They really continued to build as things began to look more dire for the forest. And of course, people power. This was a movement driven by real people who spent time in this forest. They made memories in this forest, and they forged new friendships and learned new things, and really truly loved and respected this place for what it is. So the combination of all these things together really made for a vibrant movement, and it really paid off in the end. With that, I want to see if anyone else wants to share any key takeaways that they want to mention before we go into Q&A. You want to? Okay, cool. Well, that concludes our presentation.